warmly welcome you to the eLearning Summit 2020, which runs under the hashtag eLearning Friday 10 a.m. Today we meet at 10 a.m. UK time. My name is Frank. I'm the founder of the eLearning Journal. We are hosting a global community of praxis around about 150,000 ELD professionals worldwide. I also welcome all of the 650 registered L&D professionals for this webinar, especially the more as 200 friends of our German Sync group who will join with us today. Special welcome also to the head of our press office in Jakarta. Welcome, Michael, and all our colleagues in Asia. So my special thanks goes to London, to David, for our cooperation with the Fosway Group. Hi, David.
Hi, good to see you.
And I would also like to thank to Simon, who's supporting us today as a speaker in this webinar. Hi, Simon.
Thank you.
And finally, I would also like to thank Georg, our moderator today. And I will now hand over to Georg. Georg, it's your turn.
Thank you, Frank. Getting L&D fit for the future. Advice from the front line. I will lead us through this webinar. Simon Gibson and David Perring will tell us stories and examples. David Perring is Director of Research of the Fosway Group. He digs deep into human capital management, talent management, and performance management to see what is really happening in HR and advise some of the world's leading corporates about people development strategies and execution. Simon Gibson is advisory board member of the Learning and Performance Institute. Their mission is to promote, empower, and support best practice in workplace learning, giving focus to learning efficacy, that is, the demonstrable impact of learning on individual and organizational performance. Topics will be how to get out of crisis mode and start building organizational momentum. Which stakeholders matter? What killer questions should you ask them? What to do if they don't have the answers? What needs to change in L&D if it is going to accelerate success? Why is it essential for L&D to get more agile? What does good look like? How to know if you're ready for 2021? At 9:45, we will start answering questions. You may write comments in the text field on the right. Let me say a few things about the eLearning Summit 2020. To understand the digital transformation of in-company training, we offer the eLearning Summit Tour, eLearning Summit Digital, eLearning Summit Blog, and the Community of Practice. The Summit Tour roadmap from September through November shows many German cities, but also Vienna, Amsterdam, and London. The numbers of participants are aligned with authorities' requirements. We will not shake hands and always remain at an arm's length or two. Summit digital online formats include a workshop, webinars, a barcamp, expedition, web conference, web congress, and World Cafe. The blog is about the eLearning Friday 10 a.m. The community of practice consists of 5 shells. The first shell is the think tank, our innovation lab about research and development. The second shell is the community of practice about intercompany knowledge gain. The third shell is the eLearning Summit about intercompany exchange of experience. The fourth shell is the eLearning Journal about the sum total transfer. The fifth shell is the in-company training about dissemination. The Summit card offers membership to the community of practice, the Summit Tour, Summit Digital, the Summit Media Library, the benchmarking study, and the eLearning Journal. Please feel free to write your questions in the field on the right on your screen. David and Simon may respond to them directly or after that talk in our Q&A session. One way or another, you'll get an answer for every single question you write us here. If we cannot fit it in our time frame, then David or Simon will write back to you after the seminar. And it is all for free. So go, abuse, ask anything, get it all. David,
Yes.
Simon, go ahead. How do our participants get their learning and development fit for the future?
Thank you. Let me just switch into screen share mode very quickly. So thank you very much for a great
David, I think you muted yourself.
I thought I pressed on the right button. There we go. Simon, I know we've known each other a long time, but while I'm just setting up my screen share to go, maybe what you could do is just talk a little bit about who you are and where you've come from, because being an advisory board member doesn't necessarily do you justice in terms of your depth and breadth of experience.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I've worked in a lot of different organisations across the learning and development arena. I've worked in small startups to big corporate machines in lots of different industry, and hopefully David and I can share some of those experiences, talk to some of your challenges. I know Jorg said we'll answer as many questions as we can to try and bring that to life. And yeah, I'm fortunate enough to be an advisory board member to the LPI. It's about making our profession better, and I'm passionate about that and would like to talk to you not only today but probably afterwards in more detail about that. So yeah, pleased to be here, and thank you for inviting me.
Thanks, Simon. And I think what I wanted to do is just to sort of go back and say, just to reiterate what Georg said around our agenda, we wanted to sort of really try and capture the spirit of the moment, talk a little bit about how we sort of confront crisis mode and think about how we transition into building more organizational momentum, what that means for L&D. Think about how you engage with stakeholders and which stakeholders, why and when, and what sort of questions you should be interrogating them around. Also maybe what to do if you don't have the answers, but also to think about the changes that have happened to L&D over the last 3 or 4 months. What do you need to have in your armory? What do you need to be doing in order to be fit for the future? How are you going to accelerate success, not only through ready for 2021, but maybe up to 2025? And just to sort of get a sense of what do you need to change and what does it mean to be more agile? So that's our sort of broader agenda. Please type in the questions into the question area on the right hand side if you have anything that you need to ask. But just to set the scene a little bit, what I wanted to do is just talk about the challenges that we're facing, and I'm sure we've all been through these. And so please chip in as I waffle on a little bit. But I saw a really interesting YouTube sort of broadcast just 2 or 3 days ago from a guy called Dave Coplin. I'll share the link to you after, maybe via the discussion forum. But it was really interesting. He was talking about a UK study from the Office of National Statistics, which showed that 49% of people who are working were working from home at the moment. And of those, 60% were desperate to get back into the office in some form or another. And it's really interesting because of those 60% who want to go back into work, 35% don't want to go back full time. They want to go in maybe 1 or 2 days a week. So this whole sense of how we're transitioning into a virtual workforce, how we are reboarding our workforce, seems to be some of the most prescient or most urgent questions that we're answering today. But I do feel as though there is something that is waiting a little bit in the shadows. And I've been sort of trying to track this a little bit over the last month since we know that we were going to be doing the webinar. And the news, when you think about what the economic prospects are going to be, has not been that great. This is something from June, the usual, the sharpest fall in GDP for more than a decade. And that just gives you a sense. So I left it for a week and then went back a week later onto the BBC News website. And they said that over 500,000 people were no longer in work. This was of June. I left it for another week. Actually, I left it for a month because I didn't like the news. And then I came back with this is a UK government announcement which says that the UK is facing the worst slump for 300 years. And I won't even mention the other politics that's going on. If anybody does know what was happening 300 years ago in the UK, I would be really fascinated to know. But there does seem to be, without wanting to be the harbinger of doom, some really interesting changes that are happening in our economies, and that's going to affect or maybe be some of the burning platforms or challenges that we face as L&D over the next 6 months or so, if not longer. And Simon, I know we've sort of had this conversation a few times. We've got 9 million people who are being paid not to work at the moment. That runs out in October in the UK. And there's a prospect of significant in those numbers of people not returning to work. What's your take on how pressing this is maybe for people in organisations at the moment?
Yeah, I think it's loud, isn't it, right? It's loud and clear. If you read the news, if you follow what's happened through the pandemic, we have millions of people who are slowly potentially returning to work and or at risk of not having a job to return to. You know, we're not here to talk about the negativity and what happens, because we'll build the positivity and the opportunity, I believe, that could address the skills gap, the skills shortage that exists not just in the United Kingdom, but across Europe and actually quite significantly globally as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there is something about that. We've got this sort of sense of we've had the crisis, we've had to re-engineer work. We do have a potential sort of compression around the economics that we all face across the globe. But there were stories that we were talking about before the pandemic, right? There was a world before then. And what I'm curious about, sorry, is I know we talked about these a lot. So have those problems gone away, or have those opportunities gone away when we think about the bigger picture?
Well, there is a huge opportunity, isn't there, right? And the opportunity is people are still needed to do work. There again, you know, we can share lots of research. I'm sure many of our colleagues and people on this webinar will have read a lot about the future of work. The World Economic Forum do a really interesting piece on the future of jobs. Many people comment on that. You know, to coin a film, it's not Terminator, right? It's not Judgment Day and the robots are coming. But there are different skills, aren't there, to use your picture? There are different skills required. Data is such a huge requirement. Automation is such a huge benefit for companies that if they can automate high volume, low value tasks, therefore you have the opportunity to go and do higher value things for your organization.
And I think that's really spot on, because I think that there's almost a dual agenda here, and I know we sort of cover this a little bit later, this sense of what people talking about, the fourth industrial revolution, that is still in the wings. And I think to some extent, whilst all the chaos and crises may be unfolding around us and in front of us, we probably should think about the moments of truth about, so what can we make our organizations be, and how can we harness some of that fourth industrial revolution thinking to help us power us out maybe of the crisis. So I think that's maybe something useful to take away.
Yeah, definitely. The opportunities now, right? You know, it's horrendous what's happened to the loss of life. So we're not glossing over what's happened because of the impact of the pandemic, but what an opportunity to change and evolve your organization. Yeah,
true. So how do we start to get out of crisis mode and start to build some organizational momentum? What are the, I suppose, the things that we can do? And I think what I've thought about is actually there's almost phases of reaction that our organizations are going to be going through, and maybe you can identify yourselves with some of these. So this sense of, we went into the crisis, lockdown, and it was about organizational survival to some extent and trying to respond to the immediate impact. But probably now, as people are going back to the office in parts of Europe, going back in the UK, some people never left the factory floor, for example. This sense of how we rescue the situation, preserve those things that maybe we need to keep doing, that we've learned work, and then think about how we repair and power ourselves into the future a little bit, is maybe how we can identify where we are and what we need to accelerate to, and also think about how we build new momentum. And I think this is an interesting challenge for everybody about where do we really start to sort of get out of crisis mode, Simon? And I think this is something that, again, we've talked about in the past, but what do you think? And how do we assess where we are today? And what can we do? What's your thoughts about that?
Yeah, to me, it's a really interesting place to start right now. And you know, part of my challenge to our community and the broader profession is, do you really understand your business strategy? And has it changed as a result of what's gone on over the past 4, 5, 6 months? And I mean really changed, right? So do you understand your business strategy? Do you understand the direction of travel? And can you question some of those things that you were doing before in your L&D role, remit, and what's going to add value to your organization to move forward? Really easy to say, right? Really easy to say, but can you critically question what you did before and challenge and be brave and say, well, look, actually right now, Mandy's just typed a question saying, I don't want to go back to the office. Great, right? Don't have a problem with that. If you're providing the relevant, to use your words here, you know, kind of rescue, preserve, are you listening to your people? Are you understanding what's required? But at some point, kind of like now, your business is going to need to turbocharge its recovery itself, right? So there's the people bit, but there's the business required to deliver outcome, to deliver value, to sell stuff, make stuff. You could be a charity, whatever. It doesn't really matter what you do. But can you really question what you're doing?
5-second break. It's a 5-second, it's like in advertising, you bing, bing. What I'm advertising now is the opportunity to ask questions. That's for our viewers. We have now some 280 viewers, and you're welcome to write whatever you want to know in here, because I tell you, if you try to have an appointment with these guys, they are extremely expensive. But now, they're all for free, you know. You're here, they're there. You can ask all the questions, which usually are, you can't afford them. But here, you get your answer. And even if they don't answer them right away and not after the talk, you'll get a written answer if there are too many things to talk about. That's why. So please abuse of that opportunity, ask them questions. End of break. Go back to Phil.
Thank you, Georg. Yeah, it's really important just to sort of chuck those in, right? Because already I've got questions, Simon, for you around sort of so this sense of reassessing focus. So, is there a way that people can think about maybe assessing themselves? Is that something that they could start with, or is that something that needs a broader input, really?
Yeah, there's Petra's just asked a question, how do you assess? And to build on your point. So I don't know if this translates, right? But we're going to use it anyway. It's like turkeys voting for Christmas, right? You can't mark your own homework, right? So I'm going to say, oh, look at the brilliant L&D work I've been doing. Isn't it excellent? And my 5 main stakeholders in the business say, no, Simon, that was of no value and of no use. So it's a bit like, I think we talked about, you know, like holding a mirror up. Can you be really honest about the things that you're doing and the value that they are delivering to the organization? I'll give you a really simple one, and I'm quite passionate about this. If I came to look at your L&D spend, would I know what your business does? Just think about it, right? You know, think about it for a while. If I looked at your L&D spend, would I understand what your company is doing? Discuss.
Unfortunately, I've got the chat available. I think that'd be a great one to see what people were writing there. But maybe that's a good transition for us to think a little bit about this sense of how we really engage with stakeholders, because it sounds like if you can't mark your own homework, right, what you need to do is go and ask your customer, both in terms of the decision makers, in terms of your management hierarchy, but also your users, what would provide value for them. So this sense of which stakeholders matter, what questions should you ask them, maybe is an important part of the journey in understanding and getting that assessment, because maybe, as you say, it's not about us marking our own homework. And I think the interesting thing is that there is something more about this sense of engaging stakeholders, which is not about just informing and collaborating. It's really using your stakeholders to turn you on and charge you up, energize you and point you in the right direction. So it's much more about mobilizing and facilitating their conversations as it is about just communicating what you're doing. So Simon, how do you really engage stakeholders? And I think my question before this is, how high should you aim, right? Should you be going to talk to the CEO? Is it the board? Even if you're just a HR or L&D manager, how high do you reach?
Yeah, so me, I'm going to reach for the stars, aren't I? Right? That's
okay.
what I want my profession to do. I get that's hard, right? So in a hierarchical company, and today we've got physical distance, right? We're in many different locations. I accept and understand that's very challenging to say. How can I go and talk to the CEO, the CFO, the board? But you know, my caveat is be careful, right? Because if you go there and go, look at all this great stuff I've done, and they go, that was of no value, you're there to be shot at, right? And to be questioned and challenged. But to answer your question, and it's interesting, Eon's put something in the chat, you know, about wider collaboration and how is that of use today. You know, really question your network in your company, in your organization. Are you friends with finance? Do you know anybody in finance? Follow the money. Can you talk to and understand what's happening in your company? Are you friends with the sales arm, the production arm, the thing that makes the thing arm? Are you friends with marketing? Do you understand what you're trying to publish and promote broader out in the public domain? Are you good friends with your IT colleagues if you've got that department? That might be you as well. I don't know, right? And obviously we're going to talk about our broader people HR community. You know, that if you put those kind of hubs of people together that work together and as high as you can possibly go, then you're going to kind of work out what levers and buttons to press to mobilize people, to support you, to challenge you, to answer some of the questions you've got around, actually, am I talking to the right people?
Yeah, but I think that's really interesting. I remember when I was back in the day when I used to work at Virgin Media, we would do like a stakeholder analysis, and we would almost create these bubble diagrams, right? We'd sit in a room together as an L&D team and say, who is the most important people? Who are the most important people in this organization in terms of the touch the customer or the value that's driven or the decision making? Invariably, the CFO and the CEO were right at the center, but then we'd start to put names against people in our network that were close to them, and we start to reflect on how do they view us? Do they even know who we are? Do they see us as a positive? Do they see us as a negative? What do we know around other people in the network who we might have impressed in the past, who will be referrers there? And that just gave us a sense of our internal coverage. So it was almost like doing a stakeholder analysis. And if you haven't done that before, I think it's something that you need to do urgently. But as to what Simon was saying, it can take a little bit of the risk out of, if you are going to reach for the stars and reach for the CEO, you can maybe engage with the people who connect to him first, just to start to build some of the relationship or get some of the awareness that might blindside you if you just go in. But I think it's a great piece of advice, because ultimately, if you need to be really talking to your most senior stakeholders, if you want to make sure you're delivering the right stuff, right? So aim for the stars. Think about the stakeholders across all the areas. Project offices are great places to connect to. If you're not involved in your organization's project office, go and find out whose name they are, and have a good cup of coffee or buy them lunch even, because they will be able to tell you what's really going on. But if you've got those people in the room, Simon, what killer questions should you ask them? And if you don't have the answers, how do you get around a little bit of that? And if you want, I can flick on to the next slide to help talk you through.
Yeah, but it's okay, I think, at the moment, and we'll hold it there, because so two builds on your point. One is, and it starts to answer this question: how often do you go and talk to the people that aren't fans of your service?
Yeah.
How often do you go and take that critical feedback that says, you're not doing the right stuff, you're not listening to me, you don't understand my problems? I'm answering your question, aren't I? Right?
Yeah.
Killer question. What's working? What's working well? What's working less well?
Yeah.
What worked before? Why didn't it work now? Why does it work now? What's getting in the way? Who's getting in the way? Who else should I be talking to? I can keep going. You know, we've got a little list, right? We're quite happy to share. But
Yeah.
we're not, it's not talking about your solutions. It's not talking about the thing. It's not talking about learning. It's talking about your business and your company and your organization. And, you know, it's an organism, isn't it? It's a living thing.
Yeah,
You need to
yeah.
understand how that thing works. And then maybe, and I've never professed to say I've always got the answer, then you might be able to do something that helps.
Yeah.
The watch out is you might not be able to, right?
Yeah, exactly. But it's interesting, isn't it? Because I think there's two things that sort of strike me is actually at this moment in time, as people are sort of thinking a little bit more about the futures of their organizations, especially in the sort of post-COVID world or in the COVID world, so to speak, maybe there is a little bit of a taking a breath, a resting point to reflect and say, so where are we going? Which maybe leaves the door open a little bit more from some of those stakeholders to inform you about what's going on. And I think there is that sort of time of reflection of, are we focusing on the important stuff? And I think that's probably means that those stakeholders are a little bit more willing, even though they're going to be saturated with crisis management, to take some of that time to reflect on what they think needs to happen next. And you can be a catalyst for that. The other thing that strikes me, Simon, was that sort of sense of the voice of the customer. Yes, you can go and speak to the people in the highest part of the organization, but how do you engage with the people on the front line, the people in the offices, the people who are now working virtually? Are there things, sort of maybe lessons learned that we can take away from some of your experience in that area?
Yeah, again, hopefully it translates pretty well. But you know, can you walk a mile in their shoes? You know, sales organisations I've worked for. Guess what I've gone and done? I've gone out with the sales team. Now you go, well, you can't do that now. Okay, but I can sit on a sales call, can't I? I can talk to various people about their sales process. I've understood before I've even gone on that how the thing's made, how we want to sell it, and how we price it. So, you know, I've got enough knowledge. I've got enough knowledge. Can you get as close to your customer that you're selling to as possible to get a realistic voice of that customer, to get a realistic input, to then maybe challenge your thinking or your view of what's required, what's not required, and don't always take the first answer. You know, go and ask 4 or 5. Go and ask 3 or 4. Go to different offices, different people, different teams. Simple question I've always asked. Who else should I go and talk to?
Yeah. So maybe that's a good transition point. So in terms of these like killer questions to ask, and again, we will be sharing the slide deck, so you can take these away. You can scribble these down now, right? These are Simon's gold dust, really, in terms of things that he's found have helped him. So it's the question you've already asked, really.
I hope so.
I think,
have I missed anything?
No, but I think what's interesting is I think for L&D functions and people in learning tech, they tend to get caught into a trap of what have we got to produce? What have we got to create? What have we got to deliver? When actually, this is probably a time to say, what are the most important things that we need to get done? And I think there is that sort of sense of maybe a transitioning point of do take the breathing time to give some air to these questions and start to do this vigorously, because in a week or 2 weeks, you might have a much richer view of your organization. So you're doing the right things at the right time, not just the things you did before.
Yeah.
Okay, so accelerating success. What needs to change in L&D to bring sort of higher impact results faster? And I think we haven't really mentioned too much around reskilling, and I think that's something that maybe we need to pick up about all the people who've had to try and help their organization shift, people whose roles were maybe a little bit more redundant over the last few months into new roles. So this sort of sense of rapid reskilling of particular groups, and I'm sure that's going to continue over the next few months and maybe as a future thing. But what we've seen overall, we did a survey back in let's see, it must have been May time, when we asked the L&D community, how has the COVID the pandemic affected you as an L&D function? And 94% had said they've been impacted in some way. They've had to change their L&D strategy, and of those, 2/3 had said they'd had to make significant changes into what they do and how they do it. So it really has had some sort of quite fundamental impacts. And most of the things that we've seen, again, this is from the survey, and you can download the infographic from our website, we've shared it freely, is this swing to digital learning. And most of that swing seemed to have been to put in some virtual classrooms, put in digital learning content, and what we found was through our questioning was that people who were mature or thought they were mature in digital learning found it twice as easy to cope with the pandemic as to those who said that they were immature. And the thing is, most organizations seem to be more immature around digital learning than we might tend to think, because it's been around for a while, right? People have been using learning technology for 20 years at least, or it's been available for 20 years, should I say. But it's a really interesting challenge, because to some extent, this sort of sense of, are what we're doing today with digital learning the right things? There is the sort of answer maybe that we're not, but there's been a surge. Now, Simon, you picked this out as something that caught your eye as an article to do with people's use of online learning. And maybe if you, I don't know if it's worth just mention, can you talk about that for a few minutes?
Yeah, again, it's just an interesting insight, isn't it, to question what we do. When I say we, I'm talking about a broad learning profession, right? That, you know, what we do. If you look at this report talking about utilization of LinkedIn Learning, Udemy, Coursera, you know, during lockdown, i.e. the last 3 to 4 months, utilization went up about 400%.
Yeah.
You know, let it sink, right? Millions and millions of hours, nothing to do with any L&D team, just consumed by people. Now, I'm not saying that's the right solution always and forever, and we're off and everything's going to be online and digital, goodbye. But
yeah, no, that's good. But it's interesting. Again, that echoes some of the research we did back in May, where when you looked at the data and said, okay, so has this digital learning technology been successful for you or unsuccessful, and you sort of draw a line between the two, actually the only digital learning that people said had been successful for them was augmented reality. And that sort of made sense, because they probably weren't in the place where they needed to hold their phone up to get the augmented reality anyway. So everything provided some value of some sort. And I think that's a really interesting sort of development in a way. A massive shift to virtual classrooms, but as you say, the digital content seems to have gone ballistic. But is it enough to be digital? Is there something else that we also need to be, if we want to be successful and drive faster results? What does it mean to be agile, Simon? Or what would you sort of bring from your experience?
yeah, again, it's just, I hope this resonates, right? And it's very topical. Yeah. My challenge to our community again is, it's not enough to go, we used to run this workshop and I've now put it on Zoom, right? We used to do the leadership course and it's now in WebEx, right? That's not what we're talking about. That is not what we're talking about. And, you know, great call out. This technology has existed for 20 plus years, and we probably, as a profession, we're still quite in its infancy of how to use it, right? So what you can't replicate in this forum is that kind of water cooler, serendipitous connection. I bump into Cheryl, I don't know Cheryl, I ask her what she does, she tells me, I say that's interesting, I get curious, that's innovation, that's inclusion, that's diversity of thought. You can't do that in this forum.
Yeah.
So that's a watch out, right? However, do you know your company's digital literacy? How hungry are they to continue to change? How driven are they to adopt a new way of learning, working, and connecting? And how can you play such a pivotal, critical role in that? Because the point about agile, small a, not going to get into what agile means, but small a, you know, can you create things quick enough, fast enough, that are good enough, doesn't have to be perfect, good enough for your company to go, found a problem, spoke to a load of people, confirmed the problem, here's my solution 4 weeks later, here's what we learned on 15 people, 10 people, 200 people, whatever. right?
But it's interesting. I think that whole agile space, I know you've brought agile into the sort of working of your L&D teams in the past. What sort of things have you pulled out of the big A agile into how you do things? And how has your team responded, or what challenges have they faced in terms of sort of readjusting some of their expectations about how they get things done and what they should be doing?
Yeah, thanks. It kind of connects our conversation today, right? So in Agile, you'd have a work stack, right, that says what are your priorities? What's number one? What's number two? What's number three? That was reviewed on a weekly process. What did we confirmed what we'd done in the previous week. It's called a retrospective. You lessons learned, right? We confirmed what we're going to do in the following week and any issues that needed to be overcome, so that we didn't get to a week, 2 weeks later and go, sorry, I didn't do that thing, David, because, you know, life got in the way, right? Sorry about that. It was a completely different way of working. I don't, you know, there might be some colleagues who'd work with me here on this, right? So I don't mind saying about it, but it was tough, right? We broke what we were doing. We had a long list of all this stuff. Most of it wasn't of value. Most of it wasn't of value. You know, I go back to what I said. I should be able to look at our L&D spend and understand what your business does and or the business strategy. So becoming agile says, well, let's break that. Let's stack it in a different way. And it can change, right? What's number three might be number one next week. But you've got to be talking to and understanding what you can move, what you can play with, how quickly you can create something that can alter that dynamic.
And in the e-learning world, we're used to maybe thinking about trying to create an e-learning course, or thinking about developing something, because that's part of the mindset of sort of digital instructional design and things like that. How much do you have to sort of recalibrate people's thinking to say, well, actually, you just need to prompt the right activity from the individual to help them learn? So things around curation, I know you've talked about in the past, encouraging people to make work learning, if that makes sense, or make learning work. So actually doing the work and learning and making sure you got the support structures in terms of maybe coaches or peers giving you feedback or support. How does that, is that a difficult change for people to make too?
Yeah, it's hard, right? I don't want to labour the point, but we've made good stuff, right, for a long time, haven't we, in the learning world, and people like making good stuff. And you know, you've got a shop, and people come to your shop and go, "I'd like some good stuff." That just carries on that cycle. Great, thanks for that. That might not be addressing your critical business challenge. It might not be earning you respect and kudos to go and work on the things that matter. But it's such a simple point you make, right? It's about this. It's about understanding, am I doing things that are making our business move forward? Right. And I know we've talked about this before, but you can have two speeds, can't you? Today, we probably feel quite tactical, quite operational. You know, I'm the guy that's going, let's go to the moon, right? I want to go to the moon. And we go, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. We've got to have a direction, right? We've got to shoot for the stars. And you can creep forward step by step. We're closer to the moon, right? I'm closer to the moon now. I'm closer to the moon now. But as long as you're clear on where you're going and how that connects. So kind of short term, long term is what I'm saying. Short term bets and long term bets.
So I mean, getting into our last maybe 10 minutes or so of presentation, where we just sort of open completely onto the questions, is so who's ready? What does good look like? Maybe through and after the crisis in a way. I know you reminded me that my flower petal diagram is picking up the years now since you first saw it. But I think it's maybe not.
It's got to be over 12 years old.
Yeah, I think it still works. I do like to recycle. But I think this shift from, and maybe this is really relevant, especially in how we think about digital learning technologies, this shift from formal learning and think about what we can deliver into workplace and collaborative learning, and how we both support new knowledge and the sharing of knowledge and the connection to people with knowledge, and take a more proactive view, not only in delivering content, but providing a forum for driving feedback and support and reflection, seems to be something that I think is probably more relevant, especially as we start to move into a bit more of a virtual organization. As I said, 60% are gagging to get back into the office, but 30% only want to go in 1 or 2 days a week. It seems to be that we've got a really different dynamic that we need to embrace, which is about how we take the experts and L&D to the workplace, which is probably virtual, or take the experts and L&D to the team rather than expecting the team to come to L&D, which we might have expected in the past. In your experience, Simon, what have been some of the key things that you've done to sort of start to bring this more maybe balanced ecosystem to life?
Yeah, all joking aside, it's a brilliant diagram, right, that demonstrates the multitude and many facets of our world. Right, there is many things people do. I'm not saying you have to go out and record and understand all this stuff.
Yeah.
But
yes.
But can you create the right experience for your company, for your organization? To your point, can you bring your things much closer to work, even to the point of when people don't even realize that they're learning something? Many people in our profession talk about resources. They talk about the right experience, the right solution at the right time. I feel we've got to shift, and to your point about agile and this multitude of the blend, we've kind of got to shift from, I'm going to tell you something that you might need, and you might not use it for 6 months. That feels a bit like school, doesn't it, right?
Yeah.
So actually, I need to know this now. What are you going to do? How does that help? And even better, if I tell you this now, it means this. We will sell more of these. We will do more of this. This thing will be made quicker.
And I remember on reflection, you said sort of you never bought in things like Excel training.
No.
So for example,
what? Don't get me started, right?
No, please.
Why? In today's, honestly, right, as a community, why would you do that? I don't understand. I could ask me any question on Excel. I'm limited experience. I'll go find the answer, right?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting, isn't it, that sort of thing between, there's so much when it's just some of these knowledge nudges that you can pick from YouTube. You can just put a Google search in, or if you're connecting the right people together, it takes 10 or 15 minutes for the right person to explain it and get the other person demoing what they can do and screen sharing what they're doing, just to give them feedback on tips and tricks that they can make or how they solve their problems too. So I think it sort of opens things up a little bit, but it does involve recalibrating people's expectations. And maybe it is a little bit about trying to extend a little bit more of a coaching culture in organizations. I don't know if that's something that you see significantly moving in the organizations that you've worked in the past, this sort of sense of coaching culture, peer-to-peer, manager to manager, coaching up as well.
Yeah.
Is that important?
Yeah, it's definitely, it's come out in a few of the questions. Mandy's asked about, is 70-20-10 still relevant in this world?
Yeah.
What about specialists? How do we get people to connect?
Yeah.
Is another question. If you can get your company, it's really easy to say. If you can get your company, your organization better talking to itself, right? Pick any size organization. You could have 500 people, you could have 50,000 people. If you can ask a question to your company and there's the greater likelihood that the answer already exists inside, it's almost like Googling your company, isn't it? Right? Now, I'm not saying what that solution is, because that depends on your appetite for technology, what we talked about before around digital literacy. But many, I'll give an example. Many times, and most recently I've been in a sales organization, we had many WhatsApp groups. Right, many WhatsApp groups. It's not a business solution. Wasn't authorized by IT. Oh my God, I've just broken all the laws. Guess what they did? They talked about deals. They shared experiences. I got told I wasn't on some. Right, I'm like, I'm in it. We don't use WhatsApp. I'm in it. I can see what they're typing. Right? Go and find those places where people connect or help them connect.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. Yeah, and it's interesting. It's not necessarily, again, I think we've seen an explosion, and I think again through our survey, 84% of people said, if I've got an e-learning platform, I want to see it now integrated into my work collaboration tools like Microsoft Office, Teams, Slack, Trello. And I think what you have to be careful about is not using these new touch points as a content channel for you. You need to almost create a bit more of a curation mindset in the audience, in the community itself. So it's not just about using a channel to ram your stuff down, but get them to perk up the great things that they found, because that starts to trigger quite an interesting learning organization. I always remember one of the things we used to do, again, when I was working in Virgin Media, we used to sort of have a sense of, one of the questions we'd always ask each other is, what have you learned today? Right? And it's a challenging question, but it doesn't have to be about some theory or some practical task. It can just be about connections. It can be about insight, how you get something done. A bit of gossip is always helpful as well. But what you've learned today is a really interesting trigger to get people themselves to feel as though they have made a lot more progress. Now, I think we're getting a bit low on time. I don't think we'll dwell on this, but because you've already mentioned this sense of having two horizons to target, Simon, one around the operational performance. What can we do to drive better immediate outcomes maybe over the next 3 months, and what delivers more strategic success in the future? We can leave this for people to have a read through maybe in the download, but I'm just thinking, I think when we think about the L&D for the future, I think we can get hung up a lot on the technologies, but actually before you embrace the technologies, you have to have a suitable way of thinking to make the most of them. And I think there's some amazing innovations that we're seeing around talent market spaces, the growth in the identification and inference of skills, the internal talent mobility, which start to affect us as L&D teams, which you may not have seen. But your mindset really drives the great things that you deliver and the important things that you deliver. So I tend to think of it as being these sorts of dimensions which make you fit for 2025. So like Simon said, having this agile thinking, deliver fast, don't have a minimum viable product. If you don't understand agile, there is a great YouTube channel called Development That Pays. It's free to watch. You'll get loads of insight very quick. Fill your boots with that one. The other thing is just around intelligence and data. So being much more intelligence-led and data-led. So understand the business data, understand the usage data, understand the things that give you insight into the voice of the customer. Think about creating relationships rather than driving content. Think about an Uber experience, so not just the experience that is better, but just more convenient. So think about convenience in the way that you hail a Uber driver through your phone and not have to even give them any cash or pay them because it comes out already. Just think about that experience as well. So connect with the users, like Simon said. Think about things that energize the workforce. And what I mean by that is don't send them to study just on their own. Help them connect and get feedback. That's really energizing. So much of the e-learning content we see is self-study, but just think about your radical cost efficiencies and focus on delivering value. Those are the things that I would take away. But Simon, I know you got some sort of like a summary view that I think probably just enables us to encapsulate everything very eloquently.
I hope so. I hope it's of use. I take any challenge and question on our profession. But to build on your point, deliver the appropriate value, do things that matter for your organisation. Build the relevant experiences based on the data that you can get. And my bit on experience is, just look how simple some of those things are to use in the outside world. If you've got to give people a manual, 10 pages, listen to this webinar, we've got it wrong. That's wrong. That doesn't work, right? Social's the norm. We've just demonstrated that. We've just had the world's biggest case study, right, on using social collaborative technologies. You might not love them, might not embrace them, but we've just had the world's biggest case study. It's around, it's going to stay. There's loads of stuff. David and I have given you loads of examples. Just curate it, hack it, take it, use it, tell a brilliant story, get friends with marketing, show them what you can do, show them where you can add value. And the final bit about speed, again, we've just demonstrated how fast organizations can move. Now, there's horrendous reasons for why we've had to do that. Don't lose that opportunity and challenge and ask and question and break through some of those barriers and blockers and, continue to move at pace because you do understand where your company's going. So, that's me.
But I think it's great.
Guys, we have another 10 minutes. So would you like to include some questions?
Yes, that's what we were hoping to do. So what we'll do is we can flick out to the questions and pick those up. But I think it was interesting, Simon, because I think we went back when we asked the question earlier on about so if you're asking your killer questions and your stakeholder doesn't have the answer, right? I get a sense that actually that's okay, because you can build the answer together. And actually, if they don't have the answer, maybe you just need to have some more questions to help them find out what the priority is. So I think there is this sense of focus on value, focus on the data. If they don't have the answer, just keep on pushing about why what needs to happen next and why. And that seems like that will help us along. So should we go and have a switch to the Q&A and see if we can pick out some of the questions. Again, if people want to ask questions now, that'd be great, and we can sort of maybe pick up on some of the areas of contention that maybe we stimulated in the audience. Obviously, if you want to follow Simon, he's got his LinkedIn profile and his Twitter tab, so please feel free to connect and reach out to him. But in terms of the Q&A, what stands out? I've been trying to look at the windows.
Can you repeat
something? I had a look. A recent learner survey shows that the majority of respondents in my company are not proactive learners. Recently, we've shown how quickly we can adapt and learn as an organization and individuals. As this crisis mode comes down to a new normal, how can I capture that to show what learning truly looks like and the benefits it can bring? How can I ensure that the curiosity doesn't disappear and use it to drive more proactive learning? That's Lynn Rogers who asked this.
Cool. I'll let Simon ask that first. Unless you want me to go first, I don't mind.
Right. Okay. Right. You know, are the surveys, your company survey, saying that you're not proactively learning? That the worldwide data and outside of that would tell us that they are. And I go back to my example of, you know, Google it. You know, people do stuff in the outside world that they don't seem to do in work. My friend talked about the reverse Superman effect. So you walk into work and you lose all these powers to solve problems and questions, right? And you get expected to be told the answer and how it works. But outside of work, you can fix your car, your washing machine, you can go to places, you can find reviews, restaurants. I would just be wary to a degree of what people are really telling you about work versus what people are telling you about how they learn. And, you know, there are two different facets. I don't know if you want to build on that, David, or challenge.
Yeah, I think what's interesting to me, because I look out across not just learning, but also into the areas of talent management. And I think in the broader HR area, and this is something you probably need to hook into as an L&D professional if you're not, there is a movement away from talent management into a whole theme, which is a bit more around talent and people success. And what that's bringing with it is a sense of what's being called internal talent market spaces. Okay, so the idea is that if you've got a project that you want somebody to hire for or recruit for, you don't go externally, you don't even look to try and potentially fill that project full time. You take or pick from the pool of skills that you have within your organization already, and you almost proactively invite those people with those skills to participate in your project, and then you can go through a selection process, right? So it's about creating a marketplace of opportunity and connecting your people internally to that opportunity, whether it's for a small gig, maybe it's for a longer project, it can be for a major role assignment shift. But the underpinning thing around all that internal talent mobility, as it's called, is skills. And what we're seeing in some of those organizations that have taken this sort of internal talent, how do we make sure we're a more fluid organization to get the right people doing the right job at the right time, is that learning underpins that. And I'll explain why, because when you apply and say, I'd like to do this assignment, what happens is people they go through a selection process and they get some feedback to say, we weren't able to put you on this project because you didn't know enough about X, Y, and Z. These are some of the learnings that would help you fulfill your aspirations, your goals, to develop skills in this area by doing this, be involved in this sort of project to make you more employable next time. And that is driving a really interesting, almost like reskilling revolution within some organizations. And it's interesting, there's a case study if you do a search around internal talent mobility and Schneider Electric. They're a big organization, 135,000 employees, but they've been using internal talent place. In 3 or 4 months, they have generated 45,000 additional work hours with no extra cost, because people have wanted to say, do you know what, for me to do that piece of work on that project really develops me. So I'm going to get involved and I will get feedback and do learning to enable me to get into those sorts of roles. So I think you can start to build connections between learning and future role. And maybe that's something we need to think a bit more proactively about as the L&D team, about how are we upskilling and reskilling our teams to be more useful and be more productive in our organization, not just in the roles they do, but the roles that are available and opportunities that are available internally. And that's a bit of a bigger shift, right? So you do need to go and talk to the HR community to see how they're responding, but get involved in that. I think that could drive a lot of organic learning in organizations where you don't need to tell people what they need to do. Bit long answer, but hopefully it answered the question.
Yes, may I read what the comment of Rebecca Wong? For me, Rebecca Wong, I see L&D evolving into a marketing and consulting function. Consulting in the sense of engaging and challenging stakeholders, because we've already built a strong relationship between L&D and the business.
Yeah.
And more importantly, marketing the offer in a personalized way. The question here is it worth applying marketing analytics to understand learner behavior to personalize the L&D offer?
My answer would be yes. I think any intelligence that you can do that helps you tune in better to your consumer is great insight. But equally, I think being a marketing function, probably I'd say be a performance function and also be a business fluidity function. So help your business do the right things at the right time faster. And your people underpin that fundamentally. So I think yes, don't just transform yourself into a marketing and engagement function. Use that as just another pillar of how you need to develop as an L&D team. Simon?
Yeah, grow the skill set. You know, persona mapping, great, right?
Yeah.
You know, are you this age, this type person, this tenure, this type? Perfect thing to beg, borrow, and steal from marketing. Yes, data.
Yeah, the voice of the customer is really important, and it's not just about telling whether they like what you've consumed, but getting some input through focus groups around. So what do they have trouble with? Where do they need support? What do they have issues around? And that's not to do with the content, it's about what they do with their work. So I think that's a great way to
The voice of the customer is important, you said. Let's listen to one more. Chris Muscroft writes, how low do you go? You need to understand what process everyone within the organization does. That way you can identify your strengths and weaknesses and focus on where value can be added. If you have big companies, you can't talk to 10,000 people, can you?
No, good.
How deep can you go?
Yeah, good challenge, good question, like that. Yeah. So back to my point at the start, right? So you can go high level, do I understand the strategy, 50,000 feet, got it. If you stakeholder match, you'll know who kind of controls and pulls some of those high levers, got it. And then to my point, walk a mile in their shoes. If you then understand the real pain points, it's just not to disrespect what anybody does, but if you go too low and go, we could add real value over here in area C, that might not be a pain point for your key stakeholders who are mapping to strategy, right? So understand the big picture, understand the levers and people that can control that. They should be able to direct you, and or through your network, you've found out where you can go and experience some of that. So yeah, be careful, right? Because you might want to go and play where it's nice and safe and comfortable, not where it's difficult, awkward, and hard.
Yeah, and where it drives value, right? And I think that's the thing, you need to try and surface that. But if you can empower people to make decisions and connect themselves, then there is the community itself that can drive itself if you have the right management practices in place.
David, Simon, this is how quick an hour can pass by.
Wow.
We've had a
There we
1-hour
go.
seminar, and we feel like we just started. You know, you just got me curious.
We're ready to run now. We're ready to
Yeah,
start.
we
What
said
should
we had
talk
2
about?
hours of content.
Yeah.
Yes. So I invite every one of our still 178 viewers listening right now. Take note of who you've been listening to. I bet you reach them on the internet. I suppose you're not in hiding. Simon Gibson and David Perring, thank you very much for sharing your insights, for answering the questions that we still have and that are still coming in after the webinar. So my promise to our viewer is everything you're asking will get an answer. We're here to keep in touch with you. That's why we're doing this. So thank you again, David Perring and Simon Gibson, and Frank Siebmann, who's organizing all that. And in October, we are planning 2 more webinars for the British market.
Cool.
Enjoy your
Thank you
day.
so much, Georg. Thank
Enjoy
you.
your weekend.
Thank you, Jörg. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Frank.
Thanks, Simon. Thanks, Frank.